I want to learn Chinese, is what I said over 2 months ago when I first laid out a plan and set some goals to achieve. A lot of goals. Far too many goals. Some of which were time-restrained goals that I failed to achieve, but we'll get to that. But first, a recap. For those who haven't seen the first video, I'm learning Mandarin Chinese because my then girlfriend, now fiance, who I refer to in these videos as Honey, is from Shanghai. Much of her family can't speak English particularly well, and I want to be able to communicate with them better. Also, Honey and I are hoping to one day have kids, and we want to raise them multilingual, and that would be hard if only one of us knows how to speak Chinese. So, how is it going so far? Well, in order to measure progress, we need to refer back to the goals we defined in the first video, which went live on the 19th of December, so I'll calculate the dates accordingly. The ones that should have been achieved by the time this video is posted are: I want to complete the Domino Chinese course introductory course before the 16th of January, and I want to complete Checkpoint 2 of Duolingo before the 23rd of January. And we should also be getting close to completing I want to complete Checkpoint 3 of Duolingo before the 3rd of April, and I want to complete Shen Episode 1 before the 3rd of April. Let's keep these goals and the plan in mind as I talk about how everything has been going. Learning Chinese for the last 2 months has mainly consisted of two things, Duolingo and Domino Chinese. But actually mainly Duolingo, and that's kind of my fault. So let's start talking about Duolingo. Duolingo is a savage place, where for some to rise, others must fall. Every day you must earn experience by doing lessons, competing against strangers around the globe, not necessarily to succeed, but simply not to fail. Yes, Duolingo may put on a veneer of social learning, of bright colors and happy-looking characters, except for this one. This one looks at you with a cold indifference, but beneath that is a cruel, unfeeling objectivist core that only cares about how much experience you have earned and how long your streak has become. To put it in slightly less dramatic terms, Duolingo has gamified the absolute bejeebus out of learning languages, implementing systems that people view in video games as somewhat exploitative in order to build learning habits, as well as adding a competitive ranking system in order to motivate you to spend more time on learning each day. Think of it this way. If you were playing an online game that made you participate every day in order to maintain a streak, and if you want a day off using in-game currency to maintain it, buyable with real currency, people would definitely be giving that game the side-eye. Be that as it may, it definitely works well in forming a daily habit. Coming back to Duolingo after a year, my starting position was a little unexpected. Aside from the visual upgrades, there was a new level of achievement for each category that hadn't existed before: Legendary. This was very convenient for someone like me who had, during my last attempt at Duolingo, quote-unquote, reached mastery for a whole lot of skills already, but due to how long it had been, had forgotten much of the vocabulary. Reaching Legendary on all the skills would serve as a way to track my revision. I also started in the Emerald League, which is the 6th league, and 3 leagues away from the highest league, Diamond. Funnily enough, if you only practice once a week, assuming you don't go hard on that day and get hundreds of experience points, you're likely to drop leagues, but if you stop altogether like I did, you keep your place. One thing was very new for me though. Previously, I had done all my Duolingo on the phone, but this second attempt I actually tried learning through the website, and my review? I much prefer the website, hands down. It shows you all the characters you have learned. It has, had, they're removing it shortly after this video goes live, I believe, a language discussion forum. There are Duolingo online events, none of which I've attended, but I really should. Also, I just straight up prefer typing on computer than on my phone. I also would say that it gives you the option to type in Chinese, which I found much more helpful for memorizing characters. But since I've started, either I never noticed or it was recently added, typing in Chinese is available now on the phone as well, though that's often more hassle than it's worth. The lessons between the two platforms are much the same, though I, for some reason, don't get speaking exercises on the web version. It assures me that they exist, but I've never gotten them, which is a bit of a downside. The other benefit is that when I do the learning on the website, it's much more natural to write notes and other observations during my learning than it is on the phone. However, I eventually found myself needing to switch over to the phone. Why is that? The game. Once I got over the initial fast experience gain getting Legendary on the stuff I still remembered, rocketing myself up to the Amethyst League in a week, I hit a wall. Using exclusively the web version of Duolingo puts you at an active disadvantage in the rankings. Literally all experience points on mobile are doubled. Want to get a tick in a new skill? 10 experience on web, 20 on mobile. Want to do a revision? Web, 10 experience, 20 on mobile. Fix a broken skill, get double points, so 40 experience on mobile. Oh, you've got a week-long streak done, or you achieved some other milestone? Well, if you're on mobile, here's a 2 times experience potion that will last 15 minutes. Blast through some broken items with that, you're getting 80 experience a lesson, excluding the streak bonuses which can, with the potion, tip you over 90 experience. Mobile will also have little challenge practices like Lightning Round, which is a time-restricted lesson that will net you 40 experience points if you complete it. There's just no comparison. If you want to get into those top 5s and top 10s, heck, if you want to make sure you don't drop down a league, you better be using the mobile in order to maximize those experience gains. This is the problem that happened last time I tried Duolingo. I stopped progressing. I just went on, did easy revision, fixed my broken items and just lingered there, passively watching my streak increase but not really improving in any meaningful way. I actually started hitting that same problem around Christmas, slipping into those bad habits during the holiday season. It's only relatively recently that I've broken out of the funk and started forcing myself to do lessons on new skills. In a way, I'm quite happy. It took me a 222-day streak to get up to Routine 1, and this second time around I've legendaried it after only 60 or so days. I feel much more confident in the things that I've learned than I did previously as well. That said, I've completely and utterly blown it in regards to hitting that checkpoint 2 goal. I vastly overestimated how much learning I would get done, or did I vastly underestimate how much time it would take me? The answer is probably somewhere in the middle. Let me put it this way. You can definitely speedrun Duolingo. You only need to complete the first level of lessons to move on to the next subject. And it wouldn't be too difficult to brute force my way through all the level 1 lessons to the checkpoint 2 goal. If I did that though, I wouldn't have anything to show for it. Rushing for the sake of meeting a goal defeats the purpose of having that goal in the first place, to learn Chinese. So I'll go slowly, revising my Duolingo goals to be over a longer time span. On the plus side of Duolingo, I am succeeding in the other non-checkpoint related goals. I want to reach a 50 streak average on Duolingo before the 17th of July, and I want to reach and stay in Diamond League for 5 weeks in Duolingo before the 17th of July. Right now, at time of writing, I am comfortably at an unbroken 80-day streak, and I've been in the Diamond League for my 3rd week in a row, so by the time this video is released, I will have already achieved my Diamond League goal. But wait, I've been yammering on about the meta of Duolingo, the mechanics of streaks and the experience, the system that it uses to keep you hooked in, but how has the actual learning been? Much like I said in my first video, it's very much a throw characters and sentences at you until you memorize it type learning situation, and it's sometimes difficult not to get caught up in the specific phrases it gives you because they certainly do get repetitive after a while. In some lessons, like name early on, you'll go mad saying 我叫张华, 我叫李华, 你叫李黄, 你叫张李, and so forth endlessly, using the same core phrases and swapping the names around. Some of the later lessons, though, have the opposite problem. The same phrases are being used in Chinese and English, but it's a weirdly specific phrase, and so you come to recognize the phrase itself instead of the characters and the words that make it up. The one that immediately springs to mind is in time 2. 他的丈夫这个周末会在纽约? Or is it next week, not weekend? Either way, this longer phrase is used a lot, but never equivalent alternatives like 他的妻子这个周末在加拿大, which is largely the same, but just different enough to keep you on your toes and practice other words. That being said, I can't rip on Duolingo for not reusing words too much. It's actually quite nice how Duolingo incorporates previously learnt words into new lessons. In names, you'll learn something like Wang. Then in occupation, he'll be upgraded to Wang Laoshi, Teacher Wang, or Wang Yisheng, Dr. Wang. Then in location, you'll learn Wang Yisheng在医院, Dr. Wang is at the hospital. Then in routine, or was it time, you'll learn something like 王医生明天从几点到5点在医院, which means Dr. Wang will be at the hospital from 9 to 5 tomorrow, and I'm sure it will continue building from there. It's actually pretty nice going back to a previous skill to revise, thinking that it might be a bit difficult since it's been a while, but then you realize most of the characters have been used in later lessons, so you're still pretty familiar. Also, and this is from the bottom of my heart, the speaking questions are bugged to bits. I specifically have anxiety in regards to dates. There is one phrase in particular which is the most buggy of all, saying the 21st of December 2017. I thought it was just me, but then I got Honey, remember, native Chinese speaker, to say it, and it still didn't recognize half the characters. While that one is the worst offender in particular, many of the other speaking questions are not much better. I have to sometimes revert to caveman speak and repeat characters over and over and over again before it will register what I've said. That was a lot about Duolingo. How about Domino? To be entirely honest, I kind of forgot about Domino for the first few weeks. I was getting into the swing of it with Duolingo and more or less neglected the second half of my learning. It was when I checked my SMART Goal calendar, only to see that the date for the introductory course SMART Goal was 6 days prior, that I buckled down and went through the whole thing in relatively short order. The introductory course is pretty short, only a couple of hours, and it was easy to get through in an afternoon, especially after already knowing most of the characters and words since they were already introduced in Duolingo. But before I go any further and talk about the course content, let me put something out there. Domino Chinese and its primary host Felix is very, very cringe, and I'm all for it. No, seriously, the cringe helps. I completely disagree with his association of the character Bai, which means white, and a washing machine, but he's so earnest about it and goes about it with such infectious vigor that it's now permanently embedded in my brain. When Felix and his co-hosts introduce characters, they often do it in public settings in very over-the-top ways that make me want to grab them and say, I get it, please stop, you're embarrassing me. But it gets the point across. Not to say that the Domino Chinese course is just cringe example after cringe example. Not at all. Interwoven with these example segments is Felix going through, breaking down characters and character parts in a more mechanical but still quite pleasant way that feels much like being in an actual classroom. Speaking of which, where Domino excels is its breakdowns. As the name alludes to, the course seldom introduces a concept without introducing the concept that came before it, allowing lessons to naturally flow into each other. In some cases, just to make sure you know the context for a more commonly used character, Felix will briefly introduce the characters that make up said character, remarking something around the lines of, you don't really need to learn this one, but I'll introduce you anyway. Using this building block, or domino approach, when there are quizzes, they aren't like the repeat back to me what I've said type of quiz, but more of the using context clues, make an educated guess at the answer type quiz, which I think works really well to actually cement those connections in your mind, since rather than just having the answer handed to you, you have to logic out the correct answer based on information from previous lessons. If anything, I wish there were more of these types of quizzes, but at least in the introductory course, they are few and far between. Since the majority of things I learned in the Domino introductory course were already learnt in Duolingo, and because it's much more of a take notes and learn from the lesson type of learning, more akin to a classroom as opposed to Duolingo's gamified and interactive nature, it's hard to exactly judge how well Domino works by itself. I mean, of the characters I've learnt that were unique, such as Bai, I certainly remember them, but almost more important than knowledge is understanding, and this is something that Duolingo sorely lacks. If I was learning Chinese by my lonesome without my honey to answer questions, I would be frequently confused by Duolingo. For instance, Duolingo will take both 我叫 Jiangming and 我名字叫 Jiangming and translate it as my name is Jiangming. So my mind goes, well, why ever use Mingzu? Chinese is hard enough as it is to learn different variations of the same thing. Thankfully, Honey clarified and said that the Jiao is more akin to saying call me Jiangmin or I'm called Jiangmin, while the alternative is more specifically referring to a name. Without Honey, I wouldn't really know that distinction. Domino, at least so far, does try to clarify those sorts of questions during explanation. In the Level 1 course, there has been a lot of clarification on measure words, and the use of liange instead of erge. Duolingo just kind of says use liange for two of something without really going into it, but Domino gives the background to clear things up. Similar with the verb not verb manner of asking questions, Duolingo more or less just introduces it as this is another way to ask questions, while Domino explains how it works. And, as I mentioned before, I really do like the character breakdowns. While in Duolingo I did notice that the ma character in mama and ta, meaning she, shared a similar character in its makeup, Domino explains that that character part is actually, for lack of a better term, a squished version of the n character, which means female. Another such character is sho, which means hand, and there's a squished version of that character in a bunch of other characters, such as the wo character, which means me or I. The final thing that Domino is really good at is keeping it simple. As I have figured out from talking to my honey, Chinese people don't really speak the way that Duolingo teaches you to speak. Not saying that Duolingo is teaching you anything incorrect, far from it, but it's like, let's think of an example in English. If someone offers you something, let's say a water, you'd probably respond with, no thanks, or I'm good, or something to that effect. Fairly short and colloquial. Duolingo would teach you to say, 我不要水, or I don't want water. Like, it's fine, it gets the information across. Domino, meanwhile, because why bog you down with the extra characters, will just teach you the more informal but also more commonly used 不要, which directly translates to don't want. It sounds more harsh, but that's just because Chinese is a very direct language. That's just how you'd respond if somebody offered you something that you don't want. Duolingo teaches you almost the lengthiest, most proper way to say something when half as many characters may suffice. Domino works from the other direction, teaching you the simplest way to say something and expanding upon it from there. So, what do I recommend between the two? Well, actually, I think both work really well together. Duolingo excels at interaction and memorization through repetition and throws at you a lot of new phrases and words each lesson. Domino excels at explanation, simplicity, and understanding new words or phrases one at a time, and feels more personable with its human element. Duolingo is free, and the introductory course of Domino Chinese is also free, so try doing both in tandem and see how it goes. So, what next? The next checkpoint for Domino Chinese isn't until the 12th of June, and I'm tracking well for that. However, I really underestimated my Duolingo goals, so let's update those based on my experience. Instead of, I want to complete checkpoint 2 of Duolingo before the 23rd of January, complete checkpoint 3 of Duolingo before the 3rd of April, and checkpoint 4 of Duolingo before the 12th of June, let's extend those dates a bit. Instead of 5, 15, and 25 weeks from the initial video, let's bump those numbers. Checkpoint 2 will become 13 weeks, or the 20th of March, Checkpoint 3 will become 28 weeks, or the 3rd of July, and Checkpoint 4, the completion of the Duolingo course, will get pushed all the way back to 45 weeks, or the 30th of October, which coincides with the SMART goal completion date of the Domino Chinese course. Let's mark some of those other goals off the list that have been achieved, so just the introductory course then. I mean, I'm going to make a bold statement and mark off the Diamond League as well. I am 100% sure by the time this video goes live, I will have been up there for 5 weeks easy. Diamond League is weirdly, at least for the last several weeks, less competitive than the other leagues. I'll also update the Shengtian goal to actually remove the 15-week restraint. Instead, I'll update the goal to livestream completing Shengtian Episode 1, so I'll make it part of my streaming project. I'm also going to throw another more ambitious goal on top of the pile. You see, I've been taking lots of notes, made lots of observations, and all these things that I was hoping to put in this video. The problem is, this video is already too long. And while it's informative about the Chinese language to say that 什么 asks a question, but not for numbers where you say 多少, except you don't use 多少 for age, instead you use 这, which is actually what you use for asking for a date, I can make jokes about how bloody confusing the Chinese language can be sometimes, but it doesn't really slot into the script when talking about the learning process. So much like I said in my last vlog video, I'm going to do some shorts about learning Chinese. So, new goal. Create a minimum of 10 YouTube shorts about learning Chinese. Anything else I should mention? I did say I was going to watch Mandarin TV shows, and I did. Actually, ABC iView has a bunch of Mandarin dubbed cartoons like Peppa Pig and others, but, and this is pretty embarrassing, they still speak too fast and too complicated for me. Yeah, Peppa Pig is too complicated for me. It's devastating, I know. Listening is definitely my weakest skill. People speak so fast, I'm still processing the first few characters in my brain by the time the next sentence rolls around. Thankfully, Honey linked me to some super basic Chinese stuff for literally babies, so I'll dip my toes in there and see how I go. Alright, I think that should cover it for the second part of learning Chinese. Really, it turned into a compare and contrast type video for the two learning platforms, so for part 3 I may have more to say about the language learning experience itself without getting bogged down in the meta. Regardless, if you want to catch part 3, please subscribe to get notified. What language resources have you used? And do you have any Mandarin speaking music recommendations? I definitely haven't been listening to the music like I said I would, so guidance on that front would definitely be helpful. I value your input after all because it's we attempt new things, not I attempt new things. Thank you all for watching, 再见, and I hope you have a fruitful day.